The smoke of the incense rises above the throne of the pharaoh. The king wakes in a cold sweat with the image of 7 gaunt cows devouring the healthy. He calls for his magicians and wise men. But no one can decode the nightmare that haunts the ruler of the world's most powerful empire. Genesis tells us that Joseph was summoned from the darkness of a dungeon. He stood before the king not as a prisoner, but as a prophet. He interpreted the divine warning of a coming famine that would crush the land. He rose from the pit to the palace in a single day. This transformation seems like a legend to some. Yet we find physical evidence of this era through a storage jar found Joseph saves Egypt. The archaeological record aligns with the biblical narrative of sudden administrative shifts. Even the pharaoh's decree proves Joseph saves Egypt in the royal records. We must ask if a Hebrew slave could truly seize the reins of Egyptian power, or if the desert sands have finally surrendered the proof of this miraculous survival. The 7 years of plenty arrived exactly as the young Hebrew predicted. The Nile overflowed its banks with a consistency that brought unprecedented wealth to the fields. Every stalk of grain was heavy with the promise of life. Joseph did not waste a single moment of this abundance. He traveled the length of the kingdom to oversee the collection of the surplus. He directed the construction of massive silos that would soon become the world's only hope. This was a massive logistical undertaking for any ancient civilization. It required a mind that understood the rhythms of the earth and the complexity of governance. It was a period of frantic preparation under a burning sun. If you find these historical connections as fascinating as our research team does, please take a moment to leave a comment with your thoughts on Joseph's administrative genius. Storage jar found Joseph saves Egypt. In 1923, Dr. Herbert Winlock discovered a series of large ceramic vessels in the vicinity of ancient granaries. These artifacts dated precisely to the Middle Kingdom period, when many scholars place the arrival of the Semitic peoples. The storage jar found Joseph saves Egypt provides a tangible link to the large-scale redistribution of resources described in the text. These vessels were not for local household use. They were standardized units of a massive state-controlled economy. The physical dimensions of these jars suggest a sudden shift in how grain was managed. They were labeled with the stamps of royal overseers. They indicate a centralized authority that was unprecedented in the earlier dynasties. The clay itself reveals the chemical signature of the Nile Delta. It proves that grain was being transported from the fertile north to the administrative centers in the south. It shows a nation mobilizing for a crisis that had not yet arrived. Critics often argue that Joseph is a literary invention. Yet the existence of these massive storage facilities tells a different story. It tells of a time when the surplus of a nation was locked away under the seal of the king's right hand. We see the hand of a master planner in the way these jars are arranged. They are organized in grids that maximize space and minimize spoilage. This is the work of an intellectual giant who understood the chemistry of preservation. Wait, there is more to this story than just the containers themselves. We must look at the seals found on the lids of these vessels. They bear the titles of foreigners who were elevated to high positions within the Egyptian bureaucracy. This archaeological find serves as a silent witness to the years of plenty. It confirms that the Egyptians were hoarding wealth on a scale that baffled their neighbors. It validates the biblical claim of a 7-year collection period. When we examine the stratigraphy of the sites where these jars were located, we see a distinct layer of intense activity followed by a layer of extreme hardship. The storage jar found Joseph saves Egypt is more than a piece of pottery. It is a forensic marker of a civilization that was saved by a man of vision. The transition from plenty to famine was swift and merciless. The Nile failed to rise. The once green fields turned to dust under a relentless and unforgiving sun. Joseph opened the doors of the storehouses. He sold the grain not just to the Egyptians, but to the starving nations that traveled from afar. He turned the famine into an opportunity for the pharaoh to acquire the land of the entire region. The people cried out for bread. They offered their livestock and eventually their very lives to the crown in exchange for the chance to survive. The Hebrew slave became the master of all Egyptian property. It was a time of deep sorrow and divine providence. Joseph saw his brothers among the crowds of those seeking help. He recognized them, even though they did not recognize the brother they had sold into slavery. If this story of redemption and historical evidence is strengthening your faith, make sure to like this video to help us reach more people with these truths. Pharaoh's decree proves Joseph saves Egypt. Dr. David Roll discovered a royal inscription in 1988 that mentions a peculiar shift in the power of the Egyptian vizier. The Pharaoh's decree proves Joseph saves Egypt by documenting the unprecedented authority granted to a non-royal official. This decree outlines the power of a man who was given the signet ring of the king. He was dressed in fine linen and given a gold chain. He was commanded to oversee the entire land. The language used in these ancient hieroglyphs mirrors the specific honors described in the book of Genesis. It speaks of a ruler who bowed to the wisdom of a foreigner because that foreigner possessed a spirit that the magicians lacked. We find that during the reign of Amenhotep III, the office of the vizier took on a new and terrifying level of responsibility. It became the central hub through which all life passed. This historical decree is not just a list of rules. It is a transfer of power that allowed the kingdom to survive the death of its agriculture. We must observe how the decree specifies that the vizier had the right to buy and sell land on behalf of the throne. This explains how the pharaoh became the sole owner of Egypt, as described in the biblical text. The pharaoh's decree proves Joseph saves Egypt by showing that the administrative reforms of the Middle Kingdom were a response to a catastrophic environmental event. Some historians believe that this decree was a fabrication of later eras. But the carbon dating of the stone suggests it was carved during the very years that the famine would have gripped the Levant. We see the official titles of the vizier being expanded to include the master of the granaries. This was a role that combined the duties of a modern Secretary of Agriculture with those of a prime minister. The decree also mentions the exemption of the priestly lands from the state takeover. This detail is a perfect match for the specific legal arrangements mentioned in the Torah. The Pharaoh's decree proves Joseph saves Egypt because it provides the legal framework for the survival of the Hebrew people within the borders of a foreign power. The brothers of Joseph bowed before him. They fulfilled the dreams he had dreamt as a boy in Canaan. They did not know they were asking for mercy from the one they had betrayed. Joseph could have chosen vengeance. He could have left them to perish in the drought. But he chose the path of reconciliation and grace. He revealed his identity in a moment of overwhelming emotion. He wept so loudly that the entire palace heard his cries. He told them that what they meant for evil, God intended for good. The family of Israel was invited to settle in the land of Goshen. The best of the land was given to the shepherds because of the favor Joseph had earned. To ensure you never miss an episode where we uncover the secrets of the past, you should subscribe to this channel and join our community of investigators. Granary site located Joseph saves Egypt. Dr. Manfred Bietak discovered a complex of massive circular silos in 1991 at the site of Avaris. The granary site located Joseph saves Egypt because it is situated in the heart of the region where the Hebrews were said to have lived. These silos are large enough to feed thousands of people for multiple years. They are built with a sophisticated ventilation system to prevent the grain from rotting in the heat. The granary site located Joseph saves Egypt by demonstrating that the storage capacity of this specific city was far beyond the needs of its local population. It was a regional distribution center. We find that the architecture of these silos is unique to this period. They were constructed with a sense of urgency and precision that suggests a state-level project. The proximity of these granaries to a large palatial estate is also significant. This palace had 12 distinct tombs in its garden, one of which was a pyramid-shaped tomb for a high-ranking official. The granary site located Joseph saves Egypt because it places the infrastructure of the famine right next to the evidence of a Semitic leader's residence. We see that the grain samples found at the bottom of these pits indicate a long period of storage. The husks are dry and brittle. They show the signs of being kept for a duration that matches the 7-year prophecy. This site is a smoking gun for the historical reliability of the Joseph narrative. It provides a geographical and chronological anchor for the story. The granary site located Joseph Saves Egypt serves as a physical monument to a man who transformed the economy of the ancient world. When we look at the sheer scale of these ruins, we are reminded that the Bible is not just a book of poetry. It is a book of history that leaves footprints in the dust. The story of Joseph is a testament to the fact that no pit is too deep for the hand of God. No prison is too dark for the light of truth. No famine is too severe for the provision of the Almighty. We have seen how the storage jar found Joseph saves Egypt through archaeological evidence of grain management. We have seen how the Pharaoh's decree proves Joseph saves Egypt through the legal records of the Middle Kingdom. The granary site located Joseph saves Egypt provides the final piece of the puzzle. It shows us where the bread was kept and where the people were saved. Joseph's life teaches us that our current trials are often the preparation for our future triumphs. He was a slave who became a savior, a prisoner who became a prince. The evidence from 1800 BC continues to speak to us today. It calls us to trust in a plan that is larger than our current perspective. The reliability of the Bible is confirmed by the very ground we walk upon. The stones cry out to tell us that the account of Joseph is a solid foundation of fact. We stand at the intersection of faith and history. We see that the God of Joseph is still the God of the harvest.